everyone, welcome back to Katie's Favorite Recipes. Today I've got 4 great crock-pot recipes I think you all are going to love. The first one is chicken and stuffing, the second one is taco soup, the third one is chicken spaghetti, and the last one is lasagna. These are all 4 super good and they're really easy to throw together. So let's go ahead and get started with the chicken and stuffing now. Starting off with a super simple crock-pot chicken and stuffing recipe, we're going to mix up 1 can of cream of chicken soup. I'll be using about a cup of plain Greek yogurt. You can use sour cream in place of this, but I've got this little tub here that is just a little bit over a cup, but it's not going to hurt anything, so I'm just going to go ahead and add the whole little tub in there for extra creaminess. We're also using 3/4 of a cup of chicken broth in this recipe, but that's divided, so we're going to take half of that and mix it into this cream mixture. Also, we're going to do 1 box of chicken stuffing is what I'm using. I know they have different kinds. You can use, turkey or whatever, but I'm going to use chicken for this. And you want to make sure you have a large bowl. I thought my bowl was big enough and it was not, so I had to switch so I could mix this up. So just make sure you have like a medium to large size bowl so you can get in there and really mix this without making a huge mess. But we're just going to stir that up until the stuffing is mixed in really well and coated. And once we do that, we're going to set it to the side and we're going to go over here to our crock pot. I've took my 2 pounds of chicken and I went ahead and placed it in my crock pot, and we're just going to start seasoning this to our own taste. So I'm using salt and pepper, and then I'm also going to use Kinder's caramelized onion butter seasoning. If you don't have that, you could just do regular onion powder, or you wouldn't even have to do that if you don't like that, but I'm just going to go ahead and add some of this in. And then once we do that, we're going to flip all these over and I'm going to go back over it with everything again. And I'm also going to go ahead and add some garlic parmesan seasoning as well on this side, just a little bit, not a whole lot. You could use regular garlic powder in place of this, or you could use minced garlic if you wanted to do that, or you could leave it out altogether, but just season the chicken up to your taste. It doesn't matter what you use. Once I get my seasonings on my chicken the way I like it, I'm going to go ahead and take the rest of my chicken broth that I have left over, and I'm going to pour that in the bottom of the crock pot. After we do that, we are lastly going to take our chicken stuffing mix and we are going to evenly spread this out over the top of our chicken. We're not going to mix it all in together. We're just going to take it and evenly spread it over the top of our chicken to make a nice even layer on the top. And then once we get that done, we're going to go ahead and cover our chicken and cook that in the crock pot on low for about 4 hours, depending on your crock pot, until your chicken is fully cooked. Then once you're finished with that, this is ready to serve. If you want the top of your stuffing to be a little drier, you can remove the lid for the last 20 minutes of cooking, and that's it. Enjoy! Next, we're going to be making taco soup in a crock pot. So I've got 2 pounds of ground beef here that I'm going to brown before we start adding stuff into the crock pot. I've also chopped up half an onion, and I'm going to throw that in with my hamburger meat as well while that cooks together. I'm going to season my hamburger meat the way I like it, so I'm going to be using some Montreal steak seasoning, and I'm also going to be using some Mrs. Dash Southwest Chipotle. And we also have 3 packets of taco seasoning that we're going to be using for this recipe. You can either put all 3 in your soup, or you can put 1 packet on your hamburger and 2 in your soup, but we're going to be using 3 total. I did it that way so my hamburger would have more seasoning. Once we finish our hamburger and strain it, we're going to add 8 cups of beef broth to our crock pot. But I do mine with beef bouillon cubes, so I'm going to do 8 cups of water and then my bouillon cubes. After we get that thrown in there, I'm going to take 2 cans of black beans that are rinsed and drained, and I'm going to dump them in there, as well as 2 cans of corn that has been drained. I'm going to dump those in as well. Now we're going to add in our taco seasoning packets. So I've got 2 here that I'm going to throw in. If you didn't use 1 for your meat, then go ahead and add that 3rd one in now. And then we're just going to stir that up really well until it's well dissolved. Once we finish that, if you want to add some extra seasonings, you can. Just be careful that you don't put a whole lot of seasonings with salt in this, because this can get too salty pretty quick. If you do end up getting this too salty, you can always dilute it with water, or you could even take a raw potato and peel it and cut it in half and throw it down in this for a little bit and let it absorb that saltiness. Just don't let your potato turn to mush and dissolve into your soup. Just leave it in there long enough to help soak up that salt. But once we do all of that, we're going to go ahead and take our strained beef and we're going to add that back into our crock pot, and we're just going to stir it up a little bit. Get it all mixed together really well. And then once we do that, we're going to go ahead and add some tomato paste into this. I only did about a tablespoon of this. Feel free to add a little bit more. I just didn't want a super tomatoey flavor. So you can do 1 tablespoon or you can do 2 to 3 if you want the tomato flavor to be just a little bit stronger. But just mix that in until it's dissolved pretty well. Once it's dissolved, go ahead and cover this with your lid and then simmer this on low for about 4 to 5 hours. Once that's done, you can go ahead and add in 1 cup of instant white rice, and then I'm also going to add in just a handful of fresh cilantro. That's optional. Once you do that, cover your crock pot up and let it cook for about 20 minutes or so until your rice is good and tender, and that's it. This is ready to serve. I topped mine with sharp shredded cheddar cheese and some black olives. You could also use little tortilla strips or anything else you could think of. Enjoy! Next, we're going to be making chicken spaghetti. So I've got a can of cream of mushroom soup here and a can of cream of chicken soup. We're going to dump that into our crock pot. Also, I'm using a can of Rotel green chilies and diced tomatoes, but I'm not going to drain this, so I'm going to add the juice in there as well. I'm also going to do 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning for some extra flavor. This part's optional, but I also threw in some caramelized onion butter seasoning by Kinder just for some extra flavor. Which any of this really, is optional. You can always substitute things out. If you don't like the Rotel, you can leave that out. If you don't like cream of mushroom, then do 2 cans of cream of chicken. And if you don't like cream of chicken, do 2 cans of cream of mushroom. Feel free to take this recipe and just make it completely your own. Now that we've got that done, we're going to go ahead and we're going to stir everything up really well. And then once we get it stirred up, we're going to go ahead and take 3 large chicken breasts and put that in this sauce, and we're just going to dunk it down in there and get it really good and coated into this sauce mixture. This will make sure that the chicken stays down in the sauce while it cooks so it won't dry out or anything like that, and it'll also give the chicken some good flavor, making sure that it's all cooked in this sauce. So once you get that done, you can go ahead and cover up your crock pot. Let that cook in your crock pot. Depending on how thick your chicken is, make sure that it is fully cooked, but on low I would say it'll take about maybe 2 to 3 hours. And then once it's done, you can remove it from the crock pot and shred it however you want. I'm actually using my mixer. I'm just going to let my mixer do all the work for me. If you wanted to cut this with a knife and chop it up, you could do that instead if you don't like shredded chicken, or you could take 2 forks and shred it up. But once we get our chicken shredded, we're going to go ahead and mix that back into our crock pot. Once that's done and your chicken is completely cooked and shredded or cut, we're going to go ahead and take about 4 to 6 ounces of cream cheese and throw that in there. And I cubed mine up so it would melt down faster. I ended up adding about probably 6 ounces of this block to mine. If you wanted to add the whole block, really, I don't think it would hurt anything. It would just make it really creamy. So just feel free to do around 4 to 6. And I'm also doing 1 to 2 cups of shredded sharp cheddar cheese. And I'm just going to mix that in there and cover it up and let everything melt. Once that's all melted and mixed in, you can go ahead and take your box of spaghetti noodles that are cooked fully and throw that in there and stir this all up. If you want to break those noodles in half before you cook them to make it easier to eat, feel free to do that. I actually did, but if you want to leave them long, that's fine too. But that's it, y'all. Once this is finished cooking and all mixed up, this is ready to serve. It was so good and so creamy. My family loved it, and I know yours will too. This one was so easy to prepare and just throw together. I hope you all enjoy it. For this last recipe, I'm making lasagna in the crock pot. So I've got 2 pounds of mild Italian ground sausage here. If you want to use regular breakfast sausage, or you could use ground beef, or you could do a mixture of ground beef and ground sausage as well, and that's really good. I've done that before. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and cook this sausage all the way through, and we're going to strain it and put it back in our skillet. I'm going to add in 2 jars, which are both 23 ounces apiece, of marinara sauce, any kind you like, into your meat, and we're going to stir that up. And I'm also going to add some seasoning to this as well. I'm going to add in 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning. I feel like that's going to give it really good flavor. Once you start cooking this, the noodles are going to soak up all of this flavor. So I'm also going to add in 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. That's optional. But once you get all of that added in, we're just going to stir this up really well. And then we are actually going to set this to the side for a minute, and we're going to do our ricotta mixture. So I've got 1 15-ounce tub of ricotta cheese. This is whole milk.
I'm going to dump the whole tub of that into this bowl, and then I'm also going to do 1 teaspoon of garlic parmesan seasoning by Kinder. If you want to do just regular garlic powder, you can do that. You could also add some onion powder into this as well, or a little bit of Parmesan cheese, but we're going to add some of that here in a minute. But stir this up really well, and then we're going to move over to our greased crock pot, and we're going to take about a cup of this meat mixture, and we're just going to layer that into the bottom of our crock pot. You want to kind of cover the whole bottom of the crock pot with this, but if you see some spots of the bottom of the crock pot coming through, that's not really a big deal. Next, we're going to start adding in our lasagna noodles. So I have a 16-ounce box of lasagna noodles here, but I'm not going to use the whole thing. And you're just going to layer those in there. You are going to have to break these some in order to get these to fit into your crock pot, since the noodles are so long, they're longer than your crock pot. And we're going to take about 2 to 3 noodles for each layer and just break those up. When you do break these up, they are going to shatter into little pieces, some here and there, and you can just add those little pieces in there. I mean, it's not going to hurt anything. Once we get our noodles layered in, we're going to take some of our ricotta cheese mixture, and we're just going to spread that over top of our noodles. Just enough that it's going to cover these all the way, and then, that way you can have it for your next layer. But after we do that, we're going to add in some more meat and cover that ricotta layer fully with the meat. Once we get that meat mixture fully spread out on there and covering all of the ricotta, next we're going to start adding in our cheeses. So I've got mozzarella cheese and Parmesan here, and I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of both over this to cover the meat mixture layer. So once we get that covered and get our cheeses put down on there, we're going to go ahead and start repeating this process again of everything we just done. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start breaking up some more noodles and layering those in there to fit in the crock pot. And then once we get those layered in, we're going to take some more ricotta cheese mixture and we're going to smear that over the noodles all the way. Once we get that smeared on there, we're going to go ahead and add another layer of our meat and get that spread out. We're just going to throw in a ladle full, and then we're going to go ahead and throw in our mozzarella cheese and our Parmesan cheese. And then we're going to spread that around a little bit. After we do that, we are going to repeat this process 2 more times, but I'm actually going to run out of my ricotta cheese mixture. So the next layer, I'm not going to have any of that, and I'm just going to put the meat sauce over that. Just simply because I layered mine pretty thick on those other layers, so I still had a lot of ricotta cheese in there, but I just didn't make it all the way through the layers with it. So if you wanted to go ahead and double it, you could go ahead and do that, or you could just distribute it out a little thinner on each layer. I also went ahead and added in some extra garlic parmesan seasoning on the top. That's totally optional as well. You don't have to add anything else to it. After I did that, I went ahead and I added all of my cheeses to the top that I wanted to add, and then once I got that good and covered, I went ahead and covered this up and let it cook for about 3 to 4 hours on low. And you can tell it's done because the noodles will raise and create waves in it. But that's it. This was so delicious and it was super easy to throw together. I hope you all have enjoyed this video. Let me know if you try any of these.